Hi everybody, it is 4 o'clock. Welcome to our Spice Chat here from Spice Lab in New York. Thank you all of you for joining. I'm going to spend 15-20 minutes, half an hour, as long as you want, chatting about spices, life, whatever you want to feel like chatting about. Hi everybody. My name is Lior Lev Sercarz. I'm the owner and founder of La Boîte, a spice company based in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. We're very fortunate and lucky to still be working currently and shipping a whole lot of spices to all of you at home, wherever you are and you want to cook. And just excited about that. We started about 13 years ago, this company here in Manhattan, after about 25 years of cooking around the world and experimenting. And the idea was and still is really to bring fun into cooking and explain to people how they can use spices in their home kitchen on a daily basis, regardless of who you are, where you're from, your level of cooking. Really believe that everybody can and should be using spices. It doesn't matter what you cook and how complicated it is, you should definitely consider spices. Two books that I'm excited to share with you that I had the great pleasure of publishing with Clarkson Potter over the years, and I think are fantastic resources for all of you to have. So the first one we've done together was this beauty called the Spice Companion. It's basically a guide to 102 spices of where they're from and how they look in nature before they're harvested. And then tons of tips and tricks on how you can use them and how you can make spice blends at home very easily. So a great resource to have. If you don't have it yet, get it. It's available on our website, laboiteny.com. Also inviting you to sign up for our daily newsletter that has tons of recipes and tips and tricks and ideas of how you can cook on a daily basis with spices or without spices, but you can get this thing at laboiteny.com. Also, if there's something here that we didn't cover because we just didn't have enough time today and you really wanted to know, here is my email. It is Lior, L-I-O-R, at laboiteny.com. Again, Lior at laboiteny.com. Any questions you might have about spices that we didn't cover today for some reason, please email me. Happy to answer these questions. So that was book number one. And then this beauty that came out about 6 months ago or so, Mastering Spice, has over, I think, 215 or 220 different recipes, everyday, super simple recipes that you could make at home with ingredients that are easy to source, and how you can really change their flavor profile really easily by just changing the seasoning. So you can make the same exact recipe over and over and over and over again. Just by changing the spice profile, you'll get a complete different answer. So Mastering Spice, same thing, available on our website, and we can ship, we do ship it, as well as all of our other products. So I guess, you know, the big questions that we get all the time is, what's the big deal with spices? You know, they've been around, everybody has spices. Why should we care about them? So I really think, I said it earlier, that if you care about what you eat, spices have to be part of that conversation. Whether it's a super simple dish, cold, hot, raw, fried, grilled, it doesn't matter. You need spices. None of the ingredients that you purchase come pre-seasoned, luckily. So a little bit of seasoning, whether it's one spice blend, whether it's a whole lot of different things, can really elevate the experience and take it from like a 2-level experience to a 3-dimension experience with tons of flavors. So that's the one thing why you should use spices, because they really elevate the flavor. They create complexity. They are able to tell a different story and transport you to different places. It doesn't matter if you're born in an environment or a household where spices have not been used before. I invite you to cook whatever you're comfortable in cooking, and just add spices, familiar or unfamiliar. Don't try to make ethnic or exotic food at first before you get familiar with the flavors of these spices. We are all sadly trapped in our homes these days and in our kitchen. I think that it's a good time to investigate what you have at home. The situation is sometimes alarming when I do these kind of interventions. Take some time, and God knows we all have a lot of time nowadays. Empty your kitchen drawers, empty your kitchen cabinets, just spice related. Let's not go into any other areas of your apartment. Just anything spice related, put it on a table and start evaluating one by one what it is that you have. It's surprising the amount of stuff people gather in their kitchen that shouldn't be there anymore. Things that are 10, 20 years old that you don't even remember that you bought. You don't know what it is. It's not labeled even a lot of time. Don't send them to me because I cannot tell you what they are. But do something very simple, put these spices in front of you and then start just evaluating. Very simply, how do you evaluate spice? You open that container, you smell and you taste it. Hopefully it has both. If it doesn't have no scent and no taste, the next thing you should do is go to your trash container and then get rid of whatever spice it is. Do hold on to the jar because maybe it's just a great jar that you want to keep for something else. Challenge is that a lot of these spices aren't labeled with a best before or sort of an expiration date. So it's really hard to know when you bought them. Somebody's asking about the name of the second book. It is Mastering Spice. If you missed it earlier, that's the second book. And then start tasting and smelling them. They should taste like something and they should also smell like something, because if they don't, then what you have in front of you is just powder or dust, and adding it to your food is by no means going to do anything to it. So get rid of it. That will lead to the next time that you buy spices and for some reason they don't have an indication of the date, do write somewhere on the packaging, please use me before, and add 1 year to the date of purchase. Why 1 year? It's easy to remember. They don't really have an expiration date. They never go bad to the point that you'll get sick. However, comes a time where they fade out, no scent, no smell, and again, you just own a bunch of dust, and dust isn't really an ingredient when it comes to cooking. So evaluate that. That's part one. Part two, what you will do is that you'll start educating your palate. What do they taste and smell like? Which leads to the point that if you are cooking with spices, you should know what they taste like and smell like. And then you will know what they taste and smell like, so that when you are cooking with them, you don't have to guess what they're going to do to your food. And are they going to make it too hot, too sour, too salty? So the more you develop a sense of taste and smell for the spices, then you'll become a better cook. Somebody's asking about toasting spices or roasting them, however you want to call it. I could jump into it just so I don't forget about that question. You could definitely toast or roast in a pan or in an oven, however you feel comfortable in doing them. It definitely elevates their flavor, heats them up, brings up the essential oils from the core of the spice outside. However, if you are going to cook them in high heat, that toasting and roasting will happen anyway as you're cooking. But it's a good thing to do if you're unsure when you're going to use the spice or the spice blend. Toasting them ahead of time could definitely elevate the flavor profile. I wouldn't, however, toast them today and use them 3 months from now. That defeats the purpose. So if you are going to use them right away, then yes, absolutely. So we talked about how to evaluate them, how to know what they taste like. The idea is not to watch a movie tonight and eat a whole jar of spices. That's a bad experience. However, if you taste one pod, one grain, a little touch of that powder, you'll just know what they taste like, and then you'll have a better idea on how to use them and how much of them you should use. How do I about drying fresh herbs in a microwave? Is there a better way? So you can dry spices in a microwave if you need them right now in terms of herbs. However, my preferred method, if you have a couple of days, is to just lay them flat on a cookie rack or just on a tray with some parchment paper. in your kitchen, and just let them do their own thing. Let them dry out, and in 3, 4, 5 days tops, you'll have dried herbs that then you can put in a container in a jar with a lid. That's a great question because oftentimes you buy a bunch of herbs, and a couple of days later they might start turning brown and whatnot, or spoil, and so I don't like to throw away things. So that's one great way to preserve them is by drying them, and then you don't even need to buy dried herbs anymore, and then you have your own. And you could do the same thing with any citrus. You could peel the citrus with a vegetable peeler and dry the skin, and you'll have some dried citrus peel, whether you granulate or use it whole, and you can have it. So thank you for the question. What are the 5 most important spices that I own? I knew something like that is going to come. There's really no must, I should say. I think it's very individual, and I don't say that to be... I am from the Middle East, so I have a big tendency to use things like cumin and chili and za'atar leaves and sumac and cardamom. But again, this is my favorite flavor profile. I think that once you start tasting spices and thinking about what food you like to eat, these are the flavor profiles that you should be looking. I should say that if you want to build yourself a great spice pantry, the flavor profiles to keep in mind are salinity. How are you going to deliver salinity? What type of salt or celery seeds or things that have sodium naturally? The heat component, so it could be peppercorns, and even with that family, there's tons of them. And then acidity, so how do you bring acidity in a spice format? Is it sumac? Is it green mango powder? Those kind of things. Sweetness, that could come from things like cinnamon or honey powder and things like that. And you can, if you want to explore more, then you can add things like herbs that brings a little bit of bitterness. So those I kind of say that the flavor profiles that you should be considering. Somebody's asking about the difference between white pepper and regular pepper. So here's the news flash. All peppers are kind of born the same, the peppercorns. So early in the season, if you harvest them, they will be green peppercorns, either dry, freeze dry, or in brine. If you leave them longer on the pepper vine, they'll turn a bit brownish, and then when dried, they'll become black peppercorns. If you soak black peppercorns in water and rub them against each other, the skin will come off, and then you end up with white peppercorn. And if you leave the peppercorns on a vine until about April or late March, they'll turn red and become red peppercorn, not to be confused with pink peppercorn, which isn't a peppercorn one bit, it just looks like it, that's what they call it like that. So that is the difference, and hopefully I answered your question. What is the different use between fresh, dried herbs, and when do you recommend using one versus the other? So in our world, in the La Boite world, the definition of spices is very broad. We created it for us. Anything that's dry, whether we dried it or somebody else, that we can season food with, and when I say food, it's sweet, savory, or beverages, is a spice. So herbs in our world are just called spices. The difference between fresh and dry, I like to use fresh herbs right now. Not for something that I'm going to consume tomorrow or even later, because they tend to spoil or they'll turn brown. Fresh herbs, if I'm going to plan and cook something and consume it later, I'll use a dry herbs just because it's not going to spoil. Also, when I do high temperature cooking, I will most likely go towards dry herbs because they won't develop a bitterness that the fresh herbs will do. So that's regarding that. We spoke about evaluating, and now that you know sort of when to know how to keep them. So I'd recommend you get good jars or good containers that have a lid that's sealed. Preferably they're transparent, glass or plastic, just so you can see what's inside and how much of it do you have. So you don't have to look in a container that's completely empty and that's opaque. So that's one thing. Keep them in your kitchen. where you can see them. The more you'll see them, the more you'll use them. There's no need to refrigerate them and freeze them and hide them in a cellar. If you just buy what you need and what you use, chances are that you're going to run out of spices very quickly, and then you're going to just shop for them as often as you shop for other ingredients in your kitchen. Just buy what you need, which also leads to a question that is asked quite often is, do I need to buy whole spices versus ground spices? The answer is yes for both. If you have the time, energy, and patience to grind your own spices, that's fantastic. I'd recommend you buy whole spices. They definitely keep their aroma and potency much longer. However, if you don't have the time and energy and you just want to cook, buy ground spices. Just make sure that in both cases you buy them from the best possible supplier, us obviously. The ground one will just fade out a bit quicker, and when I say quicker, we're talking about 6 months to a year, so make sure that you use them much faster. There's a question about should we use black pepper versus white versus other one. It's a matter of taste. There was a time, even when I went to culinary school in France, where white pepper was used for fish and for certain potato purees and whatnot. Luckily, this era is over. It's the same thing as drinking white wine with meat and red wine with fish. That's no longer a conversation. I think that you should try and taste white pepper, black pepper, green and red, and figure out how you taste them and how you'd like to interact with them. And all of those four could be used in anything pretty much, from sweet to savory. We also have a cookie company, so we do use things like white peppercorn. We just had a peach and Muntok white pepper in our previous fall-winter collection. It was just fantastic to use that. So it's really depending. I should say this, that if you want to make something that's complete white and creamy and you don't want any other coloration, then obviously putting a black peppercorn in it will defeat the purpose. But aside from that, there's really no right and wrong. Where can you buy the t-shirt that I'm wearing? Thank you for asking it. We sell them on our website. It's even more meaningful, aside from the fact that it's our t-shirt. All the proceeds from these t-shirts go to support restaurant workers. We work with over 300 restaurants and professionals around the country, and each dollar that we get for these t-shirts, we divide it amongst these funds to support restaurant workers. So do go and buy. There's 2 different models on our website. Hopefully we have your size left. If we don't, just email us and we're gonna get some more of those. Underused for flavor or paired, are there any flowers, I guess, used for flavor paired with spices? I hope I got it right in terms of flowers. We do use some flowers, some jasmines and chamomile and things like that, and violet sometimes, and lavender. I do love dried flowers. They're not just for candles and soap. You just have to be a bit more careful when you use them, not to create that soapy or candle sort of note to it. So we talked about storing them and whatnot, and how to buy them and whatnot. How to use them. I mean, there's a lot of different, somebody's asking, available on the Clarkson Potter website. No, the t-shirt is available on our website, which is, and I'm gonna spell it out, laboiteny.com, laboiteny.com. This is where you can find the books, the t-shirts, and a whole bunch of spices for your cooking. Spices are a bit challenging, again, because not all of us were born into an environment where they were used on a daily basis, myself included for many years. There's a lot of them. How do you even go about starting? I'd say start with what you currently have at home. Cook dishes that you cook on a day-to-day basis. And try to add a few unfamiliar spices or a few unfamiliar combination into those everyday recipe that you are already familiar with. And then you'll see, don't make a whole dish with an unknown spice and then ending up that you don't like it. cook a certain dish or whatever it is that you're going to eat in the next week or few days, it doesn't matter. Take a small portion of it with a spoon, a teaspoon, a fork, it doesn't matter, and sprinkle some spice that you've never tried in that combination, and see if you like it or you don't like it. When is dry roasting or frying, tempering of spices versus adding raw advisable? I hope I got the question right. When do you need to toast or not toast? So I think I addressed it quickly earlier. Happy to address it again. You don't have to toast anything or roast anything. If you want to make a spice blend, or you just want to use a spice and you're unsure whether it's going to be used on a raw or cold ingredients or hot, then yes, you can and should toast them, because they're going to be just stronger and more pungent. However, if you're going to make something right now and cook it at high heat on the grill or in the oven, you could skip the toasting and roasting. Keep in mind that certain spices are powdered or very delicate. If you toast and roast them, you either can burn them, which is not advisable, or two, you can kill completely the really beautiful, delicate flavor profile. Which is your favorite spice mix? I make about 350 spice mixes. It's hard for me to just pick one. It depends on what I'm cooking and what day. I do like blends that have great character and complex, and sometimes there's some really sharp elements in them. They're not necessarily just really nice, mild and everything. So if that answers, what do you think of having a ginger turmeric for health? Do you agree to use the spices in juices helpful for health? I am not a physician, although my mother would have liked me to be one. I could tell you this, we made, when this whole Corona situation started, I made a blend for myself first at home, and then we start selling it. We call it Curcumade. It's named after curcum, which is turmeric. It's a blend of turmeric and ginger and a bunch of other spices that I drink 3 times a day. I feel good, I think. Again, as I said, I'm not a physician, so I cannot give you health and well-being tips, but I would say this, using more spices is great. It's great because you can reduce the amount of sugar and sodium that you're consuming and substituting with other spices. It definitely results in you eating less of something because your palate is satisfied much faster. So that's kind of like the things that I think about health and well-being and consuming spices. You should use them because they taste good. You shouldn't be consuming a quarter cup of turmeric a day because you read somewhere that it's good for you. It's probably not good for you to consume that much turmeric, ginger, or fenugreek. It also doesn't make it really appealing. However, if you use these and more in your day-to-day preparation, then it will help you, but it just helps you because you're just eating good food, and by the way, it's also good for you. And as I said, the reduction of salt and sugar. We have there's a great recipe in Mastering Spice of a banana bread, where we took the initial recipe, and the final one that's published in this book has about 45% less sugar than the initial amount, and we were able to do it by using obviously really good ripe bananas, but also by adding spices to kind of compensate that lack of sugar. What kind of spice do you think is best for fish, poultry, and meat? And our salt and pepper, after salt and pepper, how does one build well a spice collection? So fish and meat, again, pretty much everything. I mean, I hate to say it because I know it doesn't really answer, but in my world at least, there's no spice for fish or for meat. It's, think about it, how do you like to eat your fish? Do you like to grill it? Do you like to broil it? What are the flavor profiles that you like? And that will help you. But at the end of the day, everything works when it comes to it. And then let's see if I'm tech savvy enough to have somebody join us. Let's see here. Okay, Jolie, let's see if we go and if this thing works. Let's see. Somebody asked if they can join the conversation. Why not? How do you build your own spice pantry aside from salt and pepper? It's really the flavor profiles that you like. Do you like smokiness? Then maybe you want to consider something like pimenton or some other smoky component. Do you like acidity? So once you figure out all these questions, then it'll be much easier. Somebody said that they even reduced our banana bread to a third cup and still excellent. Well, thank you. It's good to know. The challenge with a lot of baked goods and reducing flour and sugar is that sometimes it's becoming tricky, and it could affect that dynamic of the dough. There's somebody else who would like to join us, and I don't know that it's working, so sorry if I cannot. Let's see if it works. No, it is not working. So using spices on a day-to-day basis, one great thing is to make some spice blends, whether you buy them, whether you make them yourself. It helps you use more spices quicker. It's even easier to use. You don't need to bring a lot of spices every time that you want to cook. You can even take recipes that you make quite often, and if you isolate the portion of spices in that recipe and pre-batch them ahead of time, then you will save yourself a lot of time, basically, when it comes to cooking. So you can make spice blend very easily, very quickly, just by looking at these recipes. And is Muntok pepper like white pepper? Yeah, so Muntok pepper usually refers to peppers that come from Indonesia, a variety. They do come in black and in white. And if you were with us from the beginning, you now know that if you take black peppercorn and soak them with water and then rub them against each other, the skin comes off, and then you get white peppercorn. People build elaborate spice boxes. Most of them are left out, but spices have to be stored away from sunlight, right? If you have, the question is storing them away from sunlight. If you have like really big windows in your kitchen that have tons of sunlight during the day, yes, don't leave your spices next to them because it will cook them the same way that you want to leave them. You don't want to put them too close to your oven or your stove because the heat is not good for them. But aside from that, there's no real need to put them in a drawer or in a cabinet away from just regular light. Again, just not exposed to direct sunlight. And how different are Spanish saffron from Kashmir saffron? Oh, there's a lot of sources for saffron around the world, Spanish and Afghan and Iranian and Kashmiri, and if it is the good stuff that's not colored, and sadly there are some colored saffron out there. There's just the big difference is the flavor profile. It's the terroir, it's the irrigation, it's how strong, how mild they are. And the same goes for spices, different types of cinnamon, different types of pepper, different types of salt. You have to taste as many as you can in order to realize which one you like. It's not a matter about good and bad or right and wrong. It's what's good for you. There's a question here about how I got interested in spices and how did I become spice master. Thank you. I cooked for 25 years. That's the short story. I cooked for 25 years. And realizing that there's a serious lack of knowledge both in professional kitchens and in the home kitchen when it comes to using spices, and that kind of led to me abandoning my day-to-day cooking job in a restaurant and starting the spice company to really show that spices are one of the foundations of every kitchen, professional and home. A lot of trial and error in the early days. There are some documents and some books that you can read about, but it's mainly sort of a journey that one has to do in terms of understanding your own flavor profile and how to do it. And then from there, I started playing around with different spice combination. Obviously, being a cook and a chef, I'm always excited about creating things, and making those spice blends was my new way of expressing myself, the same way that I created dishes for many different years. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was very fortunate to work in France for a chef that's renowned and known around the world for blending spices. His name is Lior Lev Sercarz, and that kind of got me into this world of spices, understanding their need, their diversity, what they do to food, and also exploring different countries, knowing that we import probably 98% of what we use on a daily basis, since it doesn't grow in the United States. So we have to bring it from the outside and then use it here. Somebody's asking, what's the relationship between herbs and spices? So there is a botanical definition of what spices are, and I don't remember that. I don't know that I remember the exact one, but I think it has to be the fruit of or the berry of a plant. But then there's rhizomes, and there's herbs, and there's barks and whatnot. And as I said earlier, I don't know if you saw it in our conversation, when I started 13 years ago, I came up with my own definition of spices, saying that basically anything that is dry that I could use for cooking in my world is a spice. So the familiar things that you might have in your kitchen, but in our world, it's also vinegar powder, cheese powder, anything dry pretty much. Luckily, technology is really advanced, and there's a way to dry and grind pretty much everything. We even have fish and shellfish and seaweed. We currently do not use any meat powder or dried meat of any kind, but if I stumble upon a great quality of one of those, then we'll definitely add it to our catalog of products that we're using. To kind of summarize it, I mean, we went, and this is obviously a very quick conversation about spices and food and whatnot. Check out your spices. See what you have in your kitchen. Hopefully, it's not from 20 years ago. Organize everything. See what's good, what's not good. Label it properly. Put it in a proper jar. Put it in the right place that you can use it when you need to use it, and do that. Make a point to rotate your stock often enough. Don't buy large amounts. Just buy the quantities that you need, and don't stock up of things that you just don't use or are unnecessary. Even if a recipe calls for a particular spice and you don't have it, just look 1 second before you run to the store and buy it, or just not make that dish. There's probably a way for substituting a spice that you don't have. That somebody's asking, how should you organize your spices? So we talked about it earlier. First, take everything out. See what's good and what's not good. Then, once you have that, put them in jars that are usually the same size. That helps. Put them on a shelf where you cook and when you take them, and then rotate them as often as possible. Herbs are the leaves. Oh, somebody sent the definition, so thank you for doing that. And then, should spices be in glass containers, or it's not important? Glass is great. Glass doesn't interact with the spice, so that's definitely, I'd say, the best material to store them in. Plastic is also fine as long as you reuse that jar and you don't trash it, because we are trying to avoid that, or at least something that's compostable or recyclable. And then in a shelf or on in an area where you're cooking, that's the easiest way to store your spices. And whenever you kind of do your own inventory in your kitchen of what you need to shop for, check out also your spice rack and see what's happening there. Maybe you do need to buy some new ones. Maybe you don't have enough of something. And that's that. Somebody's asking of which world culture flavor is intriguing to you right now. I don't know that there's a particular country or anything that I'm currently, really intrigued by. There's always things that come. I think I'm still under the influence of my last trip to India, which is over a year ago, and I thought I knew something about India and about spices, and I was proven wrong, happily. I've discovered, I met amazing people, I've ate amazing dishes, so great spices, have an even bigger appreciation for the labor that goes into growing these spices and method of using them. So nothing in particular. I think the good news for you and for all of you out there is that ethnic food and exotic food, or whatever you want to call it, is finally okay. It's a thing that we can all do. It's not reserved for somebody. You could bring these flavor profiles into your home and apply them to everyday dishes that you're using without necessarily duplicating somebody else's food or a different type of country. So that's when it comes to that. Again, I really want to invite you all to explore your spice cabinet. Check out what you have in there, make some order. Everybody has a lot of time right now. And then just have fun with spices. That's what they do. Maybe one last question before I say, do you have a favorite restaurant in the city as far as spice prep in their food? Oh, I gotta watch out. I have a lot of chef friends and a lot of restaurants that do amazing stuff, and I really don't want to forget each and every one of them and offend them. There's a lot of great places that use spices. Some are more traditional. It's part of their repertoire, and some of them are a bit unexpected because you wouldn't expect them to use in an Italian dish or something like that. So before I let you go, and thank you for joining me again, keep that in mind. Organize your spices, make some order, teach yourself on how to smell, how to taste, how to evaluate spices. Open yourself to the idea of using them more on a daily basis. There's no going back after that. Your life will really change. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. It's nearly 5 p.m. If you're in a mood for a cocktail, that could definitely benefit from a little bit of spices and water. I want to thank you a lot for joining us this afternoon. Do remember 2 important documents that I hope you'll get. One of them is Mastering Spice, tons of amazing day-to-day recipe. The Spice Companion, great guide to 102 different spices from around the world, both available on laboiteny.com, as well as this t-shirt and a bunch of spices. If you have something you really want to know, email me, lior@laboiteny.com. I hope that when this is over, I will see you all at La Boite in Hell's Kitchen or anywhere around the country or in one of our spice blending classes. Thanks a million again. Be well, cook, have fun, be good. Thank you.